Greetings, comrades. Welcome to the Eastern Border. Today, we're going to talk about some interesting events that happened lately, as we normally do. But, well, as you've probably seen from the title, we have Sean from Advent of Computing on, which means we're tackling the computer issues once again, because whom else we are going to get on the show, if not Sean, the Eastern Border honorary member of the Central Committee and the Central Capitalist Cybernetics expert. Hi, Sean.
Howdy, Kristaps. How's it going?
Just woke up. Time zones are real and pretty horrible.
Oh, yeah. I just finished my workday and had a very nice dinner and a relaxing stroll. So time zones are a little strange, but I'm ready to go.
What have you been up to since last time? I remember we spoke about tanks and their software. So what have you been up to on your show, and what's new for you?
Oh, I've just been hitting the grind pretty hard. This was my last day of work for the week. I'm taking off to go speak at Vintage Computer Fest this weekend, which I'm excited about.
Oh,
yeah.
Vintage Computer Fest. Where is that, and what is that? I'm pretty sure maybe someone might want to go there and see you speak or something.
Well, they have to turn around pretty quick. I'm speaking on this Friday. So Vintage Computer Fests happen all over the States. I think there's 5 ones that happen. This one is the West chapter, which is in Mountain View, down just south of San Francisco. It's actually being held at the Computer History Museum, which is my favorite place in the world. They're fun. They have speakers, they have exhibitors. The ones at the Computer History Museum, they have old mainframe demos you can go to. You can get to use old mainframes, play games on an old PDP-1. It's the best thing. I love it.
With vacuum tubes too?
Yeah, with vacuum tubes, man. It's they have a working IBM 1401 mainframe, which it's one of the first business mainframes that IBM made that really sold to the masses. Well, the masses in suits. Yeah, they have some real cool hardware to play with down there. So I'm excited.
Oh wow, this is really awesome. But yeah, I owe a tiny debt to my listeners because last time I explained the Olympics opening ceremony. And the problem is, I made a little jab at the French, which some people might have taken a bit too seriously. I called them smug a-holes, and I just wanted to remind everyone that was supposed to be, a funny interlude there, because they know they're smug. They take pride in this.
With some soft ribbing.
Soft one, but I didn't intend this seriously. But to equalize that one out, I now need to have a little jab at the United States here, and I'll ask you a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Because you are an American, and I have a very important thing about the American successes there. Because you see, when we look at the Olympics, there are a lot of sports here, I see there. But one of them is all the shooting disciplines. Mm-hmm. And what do we see here? China has 5 medals, 3 golds and 2 silver medals. South Korea has 2 golds, 2 silver medals. Then there are various medals are achieved by Guatemala, UK, Serbia, Italy, Sweden, Turkey, India, Australia, Croatia, Kazakhstan, and Switzerland. You know who doesn't have any medals in shooting? United States. Do explain. I demand an explanation. Aren't you the shooting guys?
Well, you might be asking the wrong American. I grew up in Hippieville, Northern California, and I don't really listen to sports news, but my guess would be we don't really let our guns leave the country. We tend to keep them here for later official use.
The biggest answer that I got, by the way, when I asked this on Facebook, because the rest of the world is now using this as a meme because, well, obviously you are. Mm-hmm. Due to various current events, due to how your PR works, you're very strongly associated with the gun people, you see.
Yes.
Then when the Olympics happen and, the one place where you actually can use the guns and everything, then the United States is absent. But the answer was on the scale from funny to horrible. First one was that the actual answer is probably that all these people are in the country's militaries, and your military just doesn't allow them to go to the Olympics. That's a serious answer, which makes sense.
That's not funny, though.
That's not funny. The funny part is that first one was, if this was a mag dump competition, then Americans would win.
Now, we do actually have professional cowboy-style speed shooting here in the States, which we have the world champions here, but I don't think that's an Olympic discipline.
Yeah, but the darkest answer that I got from Americans, no less, but they're listeners of Eastern Borders, so it's horribly, horribly dark, is that if the targets would be printed out as school children, then you would succeed.
Mm.
And that's where I didn't want to go. But like I posted this on Facebook where a lot of American friends there, and they went all out about this. Because also how you like quantity over this, but yeah, so the Americans, it's just that now this misunderstanding has been probably solved. Everyone else just started wondering why don't you get more golds? Also just skeet shooting, and now they've switched to air rifles too. So that's a weird stuff.
I think realistically, it's probably that a lot of the American gun culture isn't necessarily around like target shooting. It's more around having guns. Different.
Yeah, but you have to now watch out because China has a lot of metals. So,
Oh yeah.
but talking about weird stuff, recently, why I have Sean on the show, maybe I should explain to listeners. If you heard recently, there was a massive error due to an update in software, which caused a lot of Windows computers just to shut down. And then the company gave out $10 gift cards as a kind of apologies, which made it extra worse. And Russia was unaffected by this because they have sanctions on them and they cannot have updates. Now, latest news from Russia in this area is that they also have troubles making their drones, but that's a bit more hardware issue. But on the software side, they are now slowing down YouTube en masse. They have now, like, I don't know what that even means. Like, I don't live in a country that slows down internet, but right now for average Russian citizen, YouTube has been slowed down by 70%.
Did that just happen today? Because I got my notes ready yesterday. I must have missed that.
That's about to be signed into law today, but they have started doing that since I think yesterday, my time, which would be a bit of future, which was basically when you were sleeping. So
they always got to sneak one past me, right?
No, it's just that, but obviously the first thing that appeared on Telegram channels was how to use VPNs to just circumvent this. Now I want to start this conversation, of course, with the important stuff about. I know that you've studied a lot about Russian infrastructure on the internet, and then I would like you to explain also to people how the governments even can slow down the web, and why such a simple tool as a VPN and then some quick shenanigans can actually fix this. But let's start with the big crisis. So, what exactly happened, and why do still companies use Windows 3.1, and how come Russia is unaffected?
So we're talking CrowdStrike, right? That was the big news last week. My company actually wasn't affected because we don't use Windows. We're a strictly Linux shop, which I guess I should explain if I'm dropping the L word, right? So Windows is an operating system. Your mom and dad use it. People in suits like using it. But the cool hip kids these days use Linux, which is just a different operating system. The main difference is it's free and open source software. So it's instead of being something made by Microsoft with this one choke point where all the software comes from, it's made by a community of programmers. And the software is free, it's open source, you can actually look at the source. It's been vetted by thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people by now. So it's just a different model of delivering software. And Linux has been really adopted by tech heads, and a lot of companies use Linux for infrastructure. Servers run on Linux, so anything on the net usually uses Linux. In my case, my company, almost all of us, or at least a lot of us, use Linux to work, but a lot of companies still use Windows. And part of that's just kind of historic reasons. Part of that is Microsoft's good at marketing to businesses. But the CrowdStrike problem specifically affected Windows because it's a Windows security system. So it's from what I understand, it's an endpoint security system. So it's this little program that runs on Windows and prevents you from getting hacked, in theory. The problem with the entire Windows ecosystem is automatic updates. This is actually one of the reasons I switched to Linux. Linux doesn't do auto updates.
I have disabled them on my computer. Just saying.
You can do that, but sometimes they turn back on.
I know.
It's awful.
Updates should be installed only when I want them to be installed. So
exactly. And with Linux, you can do that. It updates whenever you run update. But Windows, you can't always control that. Part of that is for security reasons, right? If maybe you don't have sysadmins that handle all of your installs, maybe you're just wanting to set a Windows computer and forget about it and not worry about, I need the new security patch this month. It just automatically does that, which is fine. But what happened with CrowdStrike was they sent out a patch that had a bug in it. Normally, when you send out software updates, there's layers of vetting and checking. I'm not exactly sure how this got through this. All the processes that are supposed to be in place to do quality assurance, that's more just a matter of how the company runs, but it got through and it broke a lot of systems. Specifically, from what I read, it was something like a segmentation fault. It caused this like really core memory error, which just makes Windows crash. So Windows computers, blue screen, they got stuck in boot loops. They just were kaput, and they had to be manually fixed, which ended up causing a whole lot of issues for a whole lot of people that were running Windows.
At that point, in Russia, Russian main news sites were posting, "Look, our computer superior to evil Westerner computer." Oh.
Of course. That's been something that's really interesting about this. Russian computers strong, very strong. So the reason, well, there's multiple reasons why this didn't affect Russian infrastructure as much. I also, from what I understand, it didn't affect Chinese infrastructure very much, but that's a separate but related thing. One reason is actually sanctions. Microsoft is imposing certain levels of sanctions on Russian Windows licensees and Russian users in general. One of those is they don't do updates because they've suspended license renewal. To get Windows Update, you have to have a Windows license. So because of that, since Russian users don't have technically active Windows licenses anymore, they don't get updates. So the update didn't sneak in, which I guess, hey, maybe that's a sanction backfiring, right?
Well, in a way, I suppose, but then again, you also have to account for the fact that Russia has way larger piracy rates than the Western world. Which, I mean...
yeah. That does get around the auto update issue, right?
I mean, by the way, Rutracker, which is their main piracy site, is often better types organized than any official store. You can search by all sorts of technical data on everything there.
Oh, nice. That sounds better than the Pirate Bay.
It is like, cannot even upload anything there, which I do sometimes with permission. I've introduced Dan Carlin's books there, audiobooks, into the pirated stuff.
Oh, nice.
Because
that's funny.
To be honest, Amazon shipping and Amazon, like, they do horrible things, and there's a bunch of people who are students and everything, and they need to use that, but I couldn't even upload it before showing like full on bitrate and coding software and everything. You have to have actual documentation on that site.
That's really good.
And then you can like look up stuff like this. So yeah, a lot of people do that. And over here, for example, my friends who make like Atom RPG video games, like kind of old school RPG stuff, they legitimately have a person just sitting on Rutracker. They just decided that it's going to be pirated anyways, so they might as well provide tech support for Rutracker forums, so that and then if they do a good enough job, a lot of people who pirated the game through there actually bought it afterwards because they were like, oh man, we got to support these devs.
Oh, I really like that. That's some backbone. So yeah, piracy helps.
That's what happens, but about the China and everything, okay, licenses and piracy is one thing, but companies, especially those who would work with other countries, they cannot pirate software. We all know that because they actually get checked for this. What's happening there? I mean, the updates, only the updates, or something like Pavel Durov and his Telegram and Yandex, they're smart people. Maybe they have like figured something out that we haven't. Is Russian computer actually strong?
So, well, in a way, this is actually, I think, the interesting aspect. So there's the whole piracy and licensing thing, right? So no updates on that front. But the Russian government's actually been pushing use of home-written software, which goes back to the L word. There are Russian-made, there's Russian customized Linux distributions that are floating around that are being used by end users and companies within Russia. The Linux adoption rate in Russia is actually, I don't have firm numbers, but it's larger than in the United States from everything I've read. Which, if you're not using Windows, you wouldn't be affected by a Windows outage.
That makes sense. I mean, and now they have to adapt.
What's really interesting about that, I was reading some articles in the Register that I really don't agree with. There was one that let's see, what's the title with this? Because I have a bone to pick with this.
While you were searching for this, it was just funny because they tried to do their own. Because I remember recently about Russian Computer Strong, while I haven't forgotten, because again, ladies and gentlemen, this is very early for me, and I'm just not at my top shape. Recently, there was they tried to invent their own smartphone, like a couple of years ago, just before the war. It was called Yotaphone, and it was made by Dmitry Rogozin when he was like still the chief of tech in their Sokolova district. And it had a feature written in specifically. The information on this phone will only be accessible by the Russian secret services and not those of other countries.
At least it's the devil you know. It's not the CIA, right?
But it was I liked how that was built as a feature. So,
well, that's a feature for someone, right? For I guess the Russian secret services.
I mean, their work's easier. But yeah, please carry on, because I just wanted to mention this before I shamefully forget.
So there's an article floating around when this outage happened from the Register. It's called "CrowdStrike Fiasco Highlights Growing Sino-Russian Tech Independence." And what's interesting is the argument they're making is kind of, I don't like it. It's making this weird assumption that China and Russia as state entities are becoming more independent in their software ecosystems, and that's totally unique, that they're getting away from Windows, and that's special and helps just them. Which, when you get down to it, what's going on, and at least connected to the CrowdStrike bug, is Russian organizations are making their own Linux distributions, which this is another complicated thing with how Linux works.
I also have Linux, but on my other computer. Can't really use Windows stuff on the front lines. Well, you technically can, but it's not recommended. Basically, Linux distro is just it's like kind of a if you open a cookbook, okay, and then you have like all this information on how to make a dish, but if someone makes that dish and someone else makes that dish, there's going to be two different dishes, and then you want to maybe add some different spices to it, and maybe you can't eat a certain ingredients, so you replace that one. That's how Linux distros work. You basically customize your own operating system.
And the crucial part there is they all have at their core the Linux kernel. It's the chunk of the operating system that makes it work. And then they have around that things like the Chrome web browser or Firefox, or what's really important are the lower level tools. So they have programming tools like the GCC compiler ships with almost every Linux distribution.
By the way, comrades, if you use an Android phone, you're also a Linux user.
Mm-hmm. Precisely. And even if you're using Mac OS or like iOS, those are based off Unix, which is related to Linux. So it all kind of circles back to a similar place eventually.
I mean, Unix, I think, stands for Unix is not Linux or something.
No, Linux stands for Linux is not Unix.
Not Unix. Yeah, that thing.
if you like using that acronym,
it's a thing.
It has to do with file namings. Yeah. Anyway, the crucial point is that Linux still relies on the same code. So a Russian-made or Chinese-made Linux distribution is going to, about like 90, maybe 80% of the software in it is still the same as any other Linux distribution, which means that they're not really becoming self-reliant by doing this. They're writing some of their own homespun software, which is a certain level of independence, but the Linux kernel, the big part of the operating system that actually does most of the work, is still written and contributed to by thousands of people all over the world. And a lot of those contributors are actually state actors or large companies. Microsoft contributes.
I recently got John Michael Gaultier on the show, and we spoke about the future of war in general. And he spoke about the Cold War in space with satellites, with how countries are now putting things that damage other satellites there. And Russia apparently has sent in satellites with those ripsaws attached to them in space. That's innovation, comrade.
That is innovation, but I think maybe making a new Linux distro isn't that much of innovation. There's still Microsoft software on it. At least for the right now, it protected Russia and, from what I gather, China from this specific Windows issue. But you're not totally independent in your software ecosystem if you're just using your own Linux distribution that you make.
Makes sense. They haven't achieved the levels that a lot of people attribute to them.
At least not in that respect, which I think is an important distinction to make. Because one of the... I might get on a soapbox here. If I do, you can shut me up. One of the things that I think is so important about free and open source software like Linux is that it's the result of years, well, decades at this point, of international collaboration. It's not independent software in that sense. It's software that a lot of people have worked on over cultural and geopolitical borders. They've all come together and made this great software and being like, oh, yes, this is a great tool for the independence of nation states. I think that kind of goes against the spirit of free and open source software in a weird way.
I mean, it's not just about that. I mean, in one of the weirdest events, Estonia, out of all places, enabled Putin's massive cheating in elections. Because if you remember, back in the day, Estonia switched to allow electronic voting in elections. Then the company that made it sold the basic software to Russia, and then now their electronic voting system in Russia is the way how they can cheat in their elections without having to, stuff the ballot boxes too much and all that stuff. Which is now, if you know something about Estonia, you know that they are very, very, very disappointed about this.
I can see why you'd be pretty sad about that. That's a pretty bad legacy to have.
I mean, this is kind of a thing, but about the second issue, because I know how Chinese firewall works. Iffy, very. I know some elements of it, but can Russia just switch off like YouTube? They're now claiming that it's Google problems with Google. Obviously, right? It's all total lies with this, because nowhere else YouTube is being slowed down, and the reports are 70% slowdown. YouTube in Russia, because of how their TV is just full with political propaganda and literally nothing else. They have even stopped showing like entertainment. Even for older generations, that's like the default thing people use. So VPNs now obviously becoming more popular there. How do you even slow down a service like that?
This is, I think, the much more fascinating story.
Okay.
There's some background here. So normally, you shouldn't be able to do that. The reason for that is the internet is designed as it's a distributed network. What that means is that there's all these multiple nodes that are used for routing packets around, for giving people IP addresses and sending data everywhere, requesting data, all that. And those nodes are all linked up like a spider web. Each node has multiple links to other nearby nodes, sometimes even distant nodes. It's designed that way specifically for mutually assured destruction. And I'm not even joking about that. I think I've told you this story, right, Kristaps? Or at least you've read it, right?
That thing was serious because in case of nuclear weapons blowing up.
Yeah.
This, by the way, is the reason why Vladimir Putin, who does not know how to use internet, not even joking, he doesn't have a smartphone, he gets internet delivered to him in little red binders. He openly states that the internet, the whole of internet, is still a CIA project, and he does not believe the CIA ever abandoned it, and he considers all of this to be a CIA psyop. So, congratulations, comrade! You now work on a CIA psyop too, like exactly at this very moment.
Oh yeah. The creepy thing is he's right in spirit, I guess, kind of. So the actual design of the internet was made at the Rand Corp by this guy named Paul Barron, and Rand Corp was a federally funded U.S. think tank funded by the DoD. So there is a bit of that. The distributed nature of it was you can find it's this 12-volume report where Paul Barron goes through and he has different destructive scenarios for how much of the network can get bombed out and still have command and control for sending missiles. It's spooky, very spooky stuff. One of the legacies of that paranoid design is that in general, the internet's super resilient. If part of it goes down, it's designed so that packets can move around the outage. It's really hard for a large swath of the network to be disconnected because there's too many interconnects.
And that's really good for the customers too, I suppose. I mean, recently we had huge solar flare activity, and that didn't bring it down the web.
Mm-hmm.
And even this outage, the other stuff worked. Just you reroute things, I suppose. That's good, isn't it?
Yeah. Once again, it's one of these testaments to human achievement. It's a fascinating and very impressive system. You can actually break it, and it's really hard to do. And it's kind of impressive that some state actors have done it. Where should we start this? I guess China, right?
Here, comrade, you're on your own because you know way more about this.
Yeah.
So I don't like. We have reached the level where I don't even know what to precisely ask you about this before understanding some stuff. So
yeah, we've reached my domain.
Hi everyone, Annette here. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Eastern Border. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who are supporting us on Patreon or via our website. Your financial support is really what keeps this show going, so thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If you're not a Patreon and would like to become one, head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/theeasternborder, or support us via our website, www.theeasternborder.lv. That said, hope you're enjoying this episode and talk to you later. Bye!
We have reached your domain. We're now so. Please, master of cyberspace, guide us through.
All right, I will begin the great work. So, well, you're not trying to transmute lead at the end of this?
No. But that would be that would be a fun side project, though. Transmute lead. Okay, go on, please.
So, different state actors have different approaches to censoring and controlling the internet. North Korea, I think, is the most interesting case study. They actually have allocated IP addresses. There are North Korean servers on the internet, but those are they're physically isolated. So they're actual hookups to the internet. You have to be at certain universities or at certain government installations. The rest of the country still has a network, but it's physically isolated from the internet. There aren't wires connecting there. It's called an intranet to the internet. So you can actually go online and check your email and surf the Korean or North Korean internet, but it just doesn't hook up to the rest of the network. That's one approach to go with. But for that, that presupposes that your country started hooking up to the internet after the internet was well established, and you can actually build an internal network that's physically isolated from the external network, and there's not companies trying to make a buck hooking people's homes up. China's approach, less air-gapped than North Korea. They have straight-up connections to the World Wide Web, but they're more heavily state-controlled. So because the state has a certain level of control to those nodes that connect to the larger internet, that's how China's able to implement the Great Firewall, is there's this hardcore state control. And they started out that way. China actually connected to the internet way late into the game, so the government was able to go in and as they're connecting, just go, okay, we're stepping in here, and point on the org chart, point to the nodes that they want to have power over. Russia is kind of going backwards. They were already connected to the net. The turning point here, at least legally speaking, is in 2019, the sovereign internet laws. Did you read those when those came across, Kristaps?
Oh yeah. They existed there, and they wanted to kind of do a separation from the rest of the world, but that was a bunch of technical lingo. I do have to admit, I didn't fully comprehend what was going on there, because they always write in this very strange form of legalese where they only mention internet in air quotes. They never just write internet. They write the network of information technologies that delivers information called internet. And it's super legalistic. I guess it's made that way specifically so that people like me who have some computer knowledge but not nowhere near compared to yours, so that we would be confused and maybe not understand it, which would make sense. But yeah,
or it might also just be legislation lagging behind technology, like it tends to.
That never happens in the West.
Oh, not at all. So the sovereign internet laws started setting up the ability of the Russian state to control the nodes that connect Russia to the rest of the internet. So they're kind of trying after the fact to go in and implement something similar to the Great Firewall. It's a little harder because they have to go to private companies that own the actual nodes that connect to the network and muscle their way in. From what I understand from reading translated articles, it's mainly that they're putting software on those nodes. So if you think about it a big grid, you have all these nodes around the periphery of the Russian net. the Russian state is going in and at each of those nodes installing some kind of software that can filter and control the flow of information in and out of the Russian network. What's spooky is it works well enough that they've done multiple tests of disconnecting the Russian network from the rest of the worldwide network. There was one that is well documented that happened in July of 2023, and supposedly there was one that happened last month, like a test of actually shutting off the external flow of communication. The only citation I've seen for that goes to a blog post that no longer exists, so that may or may not be true, but the capability is there. So if they are throttling YouTube, which I believe that would be how they're doing it, is they have software control over these routing nodes that connect to the larger internet.
Okay. So far, so understandable.
I mean, what else do you want to know? It's kind of horrifying because the internet shouldn't be able to do that as long as there aren't bad actors in the network.
Oh, comrades.
Yeah.
Plenty of bad.
Are there bad actors in the room with us right now, Kristaps?
Oh no! Bad actors are a realistic subject because, and I told you to listen to that one episode as we're moving away from this, because you see, I prepared more Kartapolov's law things for the dessert.
Are we talking about the gadgets?
Yes, because I thought the Kartapolov's law story couldn't get any funnier, but I was wrong.
Oh no.
I was wrong.
Oh no.
So the State Duma, because this is tied to how, they have the sovereign internet with which they can cut off. However, what they do is just cool. So after all this mess, the State Duma Committee on Defense recommended that the resolution on the adoption of the law on the responsibility for gadgets, all this stuff, would be declared null and void. And the document available is in the database. They want to correct the bill, and now they propose the following wording: quote, "This provision does not apply to servicemen and persons equated to them in the event that the said electronic products are used to perform their duties in accordance with all the legal procedures." Translated into human, basically the ban remains in place with a 10-day punishment for any use of a phone on the front, since there are literally zero normative legal acts that would actually define what constitutes performance of official duties. And now I want to give you the sweet part of this, because I wanted to do something.
Oh, it gets better.
I wanted to give you some quotes from all these Z authors, which is like the best part, how they're raging.
Mm-hmm.
Two Majors writes, quote, "It remains to correct, in accordance with actual realities, those very normative legal acts of federal executive bodies or federal state bodies in which the law provides for military service, which they never will do." Someone called Goodwill Revenge, the references Game of Thrones. What's dead can't die. Okay. How will they determine what it was used for? Who will determine? I guess now the soldiers will have to pay bribes just to basically not get it confiscated.
Well, I guess that's an effective way to implement a tax on the soldiery, right?
I mean, yeah, this is Roman of Light comments, when the level of competence is like that of a monkey. First, they adopted it, obviously not even realizing that all combat work is built on these very gadgets. And then when it came to it, after adoption, they canceled it themselves to a way. I remind you that this is a whole committee of the State Duma on the state defense, and the leader is Kartapolov.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's just amazing. And Koshevarov, one of the biggest Z channels out there, wrote that, quote, "The Duma, one of my favorite organs of power, which should really represent the people and their aspirations, has turned into a usurper, a violator of citizens' rights, and in general into an unprofessional assembly where senile degenerates go to die."
And I think some of that might be true of many certain governing bodies.
These are the very same people who, let me remind you, put the first AI rights into practice.
Mm-hmm.
I will not let any IT specialist forget the glorious Zhirinovsky AI, because that was so stupid I cried a little.
Well, he needs to come back, right?
The AI exists, and it won't.
Man, that makes me wonder how much the Duma actually understands about the reality of technology, or if there's just like, are lobbyists a thing for the Duma like they are in the US government?
No, there is no lobbies there. Not official ones anyway. There are lots of lobbying, but there are no lobbyists, if you know what I mean.
Okay. I wonder how much that's swaying like tech legislation then, because they're just out of touch and don't know what's going on listen to special interests.
They certainly don't listen to your podcast, that's for sure, which you people should. But I think the real study here is that there are three options about this. Number one is the fact that, in the previous minister of defense, Shoigu, he did a lot of messy stuff, but he still has people inside the Ministry of Defense, which means that, he just wants to hush the flow of information. Also, the flow of information of the front needs to kind of be cut down, because that's what all the complaints happen, which I read about how, what's going wrong and how they're suffering and everything. And that looks bad. And then people kind of don't want to, go and die in the war, which obviously is a bad thing, because Putin would gladly enjoy more people on the front lines. So they want to cut that down. They're given their officers the ability to, let's just say, earn some extra cash on the side, because the situation with the amount of people that they have is such that if in earlier times they had to pay about 200,000 rubles for a new person to just join in as a volunteer to fight on the front from poorer districts, then now, at least in like surrounding Moscow, the sum has reached 2 million rubles, which is about $20,000. And imagine what happens on the front in the famous Dedovshchina or the hazing culture, when a person who has been angry there, who's seen all the horrors and has received only 200,000 rubles or about $2,000, is now joined by this fresh guy from near Moscow who has received 10 times the amount of money with the stuff that he's bought and everything. Totally nothing will happen. Absolutely. Every discipline is going to be great and nothing. That's one theory, that they just want to stop the flow of information to the front. And then secondly is the fact that traditionally in Russia there's always this saying, the Tsar is good, the boyars are bad. And normally Putin needs to look better, because people do blame Putin after all the acts of terrorism and everything, but he can't really show anything but the capture of tiny little village on the front lines, right? So the idea is that they made this law, and now they're going to do some, they're going to visually amend it so it looks a bit better, and then Putin is going to come out and say, comrades, you do not know anything about computers. I know everything about computer, and I will sign this only when you change. Basically, they want to fabricate some good news for themselves, because Putin has caught on to the fact that everyone now realizes he doesn't understand what he's talking about when it comes to any new technology. So, and he maybe wants to do a PR thing.
Well, and if they're fabricating good news, that does tie right into using these kinds of restrictions to control the flow of information, because then you can have any information you want flow from the front, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but most likely this law is going to be applied extremely selectively, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be, whether or not the new recruit with his freshly acquired contract money whether or not he pays his commander to not be sent to meet assault or everything. And also, this just continues from the part where that Gosduma guy said, if your phone gets taken away, please email me, and I will look at your problem.
Please email me from your smartphone to tell me if your smartphone was stolen.
Yeah, I mean, that was just beautiful, because again, all this mess is just weird to the level that again, as I was organizing this interview, that was the one episode which I actually said Shad to give a listen to, because that was something else. That was just something else.
What you were saying in that about having drones but not having the equipment to fly them, it just doesn't make a lot of sense now, does it?
But comrade, sense making is not the Soviet computer's strong side. Soviet computer makes 3 calculations per minute, but each calculation strikes with the force of 1,000 hammers.
The best calculations.
Obviously, it automatically cuts out all the unneeded stuff. But yeah, so that we would end on a bit of a better note, because the idea of authoritarian governments actually controlling information access and being able even to cut off the internet, on which I make my living, as people know, right? That would be pretty scary. And oh boy, if these governments have such opportunities, then that's the one thing that people kind of think about. Because as I was researching this on a more philosophical note, to finally wrap this up, I read about how people like dissidents from the Soviet era had written that if internet existed in the Soviet Union, it would have collapsed way faster, way earlier, because they can imply very strict censorship and everything. And the reason why South Korea and everyone else just censors the internet is because freedom of information is a taboo, is an anathema to them, which is scary when we think that if that's doable, then other governments might decide that they would want to do that as well, especially if they didn't notice what's happening.
Well, other governments have. It's not just Russia and China and North Korea. The US also has perhaps the infrastructure to do similar kinds of tricks.
I wanted to end this episode on a good note.
There's no good notes when we're talking about spooky internet controls.
Okay, yeah, I should have known better. My mistake. Sorry.
Also, shouldn't let me talk. I'm always the eternal pessimist, as you know.
No, man, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, look, this is why I normally leave these things to more competent people such as yourself, because those are actually serious issues that need to be paid. Like you need to draw attention to them and think about the whole situation. If you don't admit the problem and don't know what's going on, then how will anything change eventually? How will people know that they might one day need to actually defend their rights to watch porn and cat videos?
Exactly. And this is why it's important to have these conversations. This is part of the free flow of information that is so crucial to everything these days.
Oh, especially to our work. Thank you for being on. I have to say goodbye to my wife before she leaves work, and then I have to go to actually driving classes. But before I say the magic words, please do inform people who haven't heard your show what's it all about and where to find it.
So my name's Sean. I host the Advent of Computing podcast. It's all about the usually obscure and less well-studied history of computing. It's on anywhere you listen to podcasts.
This man has done stuff for NASA on their stuff, and he's actually he's an actual expert and computer scientist, like legit. You heard that stuff, right? I didn't know a lot of this, so be sure to subscribe and give him a listen. And next time something extremely weird and IT related happens, I'll be sure to have you on again, because it's always a pleasure to work with you.
I'm always happy to come and talk.
Okay, comrade. And now, do svidaniya, tavarishi, and as always, remember, happiness is mandatory. And that applies to your eternal pessimism too, Sean.
I'll do my best.
Thank you for listening to the Eastern Border Show. If you have any questions or comments, go to our website, theeasternborder.lv, and leave a comment there. Or email us at theeasternborder@gmail.com. We'll be sure to answer. You can also follow us on social media and contact us there. If you enjoyed this episode, then leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends about us. It really helps us grow the show. And remember, happiness is mandatory.